month of July, I read 3 books, and I also went to go see Superman. Superman, directed by James Gunn, is the kind of summer blockbuster that actually makes me excited to go to the movies and spend $30 on concessions. I had a cherry slushie, half cut with Pepsi, and a small popcorn. It was a fun superhero movie with a lot of heart, and it was refreshing to see a level of sincerity and earnestness that we've come to not expect from superhero movies. The general thrust of the movie is, who cares about geopolitics? People are dying. We should do whatever we can to prevent that. Superman, of course, has nothing to do with books or Steven Erikson's 2021 fantasy book, The God Is Not Willing, except it actually does. The God Is Not Willing opens with a scene of 4 Templar warriors gathering on the side of a huge escarpment. I had to look up what an escarpment was the first time I read the scene. It's basically a huge plateau. They're looking out into the distance and realizing that the ancient ice realm north of their lands is melting. All of that water has only one place to go, where they all live. These leaders decide to put aside their generational conflicts and unite under one war leader to carve their way into the Malazan Empire southwards, kicking off a mass migration. If you've read the 10 preceding books of the Malazan Book of the Fallen, then you know that Templar warriors are these absolutely batshit insanely strong people who are not to be fucked with under any circumstances. The idea of 4 tribes of these people coming together to unite under one war leader is a scary prospect, made all the more terrifying by imagining how horrible the catalyst must be in order for these fiercely traditional people to actually set aside their histories and work together. The impending doom of this magical flood undercuts the entire novel and adds a sense of ambient tension to every single scene. We're introduced to a new cast of Malazan Marines who maintain a familiar banter that fans of the Big Ten books will love. Erikson's sense of humor is at its absolute sharpest here. I personally adored every bit of absurd wordplay and base fart and shit jokes that he had to offer. I can officially say that Tehel and Bug have been dethroned as fantasy's most iconic duo. Stillwater and Annex Fro have stolen their crown. The Malazans hire a mercenary company with whom they have a pretty fraught history and almost immediately spend a lot of the novel trying to kill each other, but covertly at night. These scenes in the book are some of my favorite, especially because they provide a lot of comedic diversion, but also we get to see some crazy magical assassin Warren shit go down, and I don't think I'll ever fully understand the way that magic works in Malazan, but after this book, all I need to know is that it works exactly the way that it needs to. I'm getting to the Superman connection, I promise. The real heart of The God Is Not Willing is the character Rant. He is the son of the god Karsa Orlong, and this book is really an excavation of Karsa's acts of violence in House of Chains, book 4 of the Malazan Book of the Fallen. How that original brutality has reverberated to beget yet more violence in its wake. Rant is a young boy who is larger than the other children, and yet these children still call him names and throw stones at him throughout his childhood. And despite all that, he still thinks of these kids as his friends. Rant is a deeply lonely and broken character at the beginning of this book. He's forced to leave his home forever because of something truly terrible that happens to him. The rest of the novel follows Rant as he journeys to find the Templar, who are his kin through Karsa Orlong. You can start to see how these disparate storylines will converge eventually in classic Erikson style, and it always blows my mind just how coherent Malazan novels are, despite coming at the central thesis in so many different angles. It all comes together eventually. One of my favorite things about this part of the novel is how Rand comes across these strangers who show him more kindness than the people who knew him his whole life ever did. It's just incredibly uplifting and important to the central thesis of the book. Rand is the Superman of The God Is Not Willing. He has all the reason in the world to be angry and to use his physical strength to dominate other people who would do him harm. When anyone threatens to hurt the people he cares about, he does employ that strength, but it's never from a place of vindictiveness. Rand's storyline and its conclusion made me sob. With Rand, Erikson is showing us that true heroism and bravery is to break the cycles of violence that you're born into, no matter how justified you would be in giving in to the hatred. Superman in the movie is humiliated and ridiculed, and his whole worldview is rocked. But there's never a shade of doubt in his mind as to whether or not he's going to do the right thing. That, to me, is what real hope is. Knowing the deepest and darkest things that humanity is capable of, but not giving in to nihilism and irony. Staying earnest and sincere and hopeful is an epic act in the face of a mundane evil. I almost wish I could recommend this to people because the structure is a little bit more accessible than the main 10 Malazan series, but as much as I wish I could give you all a shortcut to experiencing the Malazan experience, I think there's no shortcut, and you just have to read the big 10 books and then read The God Is Not Willing to get what I'm saying here. But I think it's so worth it, and I just love Malazan. Speaking of summer blockbusters, I finally got around to reading last year's biggest fantasy release, The Will of the Many by James Islington. I did get the sense upon reading this book that it was concocted in a lab to be as wildly popular as possible. The Roman-inspired world building and the first-person present tense narration kept things really fresh, and I flew through this book. It was eminently readable. I have to give a special shout out to the audiobook narrator because I don't think that I would have enjoyed this book as much if I hadn't done audiobook. His performance really added a lot to the prose, which, in my opinion, the prose in The Will of the Many is not the strongest. It's not that the prose is horrible. I think that it's just more functional over having a specific style. And on a sentence to sentence level, it's competent, but not on the level where I would be like, wow, that's a beautiful grouping of words. I only bring up prose because the book reminds me so much of The Name of the Wind, which in my opinion has some truly beautiful groupings of words. I'm actually glad that more and more people are writing books inspired by the Kingkiller Chronicles because at the end of the day, who knows when Doors of Stone is going to come out, and if enough people write copycats, maybe one will finally be better than the source material, and we can all finally stop wondering what's inside the thrice-locked chest. The main character Vis has already been garnering the Gary Stu allegations, and I have to defend my guy because I think that in this story, it serves a specific purpose. It makes sense for his background, for him to be above average at pretty much everything he does. One of the main aspects of this book is that there is an explicit and entrenched hierarchy in this world, with people on the bottom rungs ceding their life force, called will, to people above them. This will powers everything from people being uber strong, basically superhero type people, to things as mundane as powering street lamps. The novel opens in a prison where Vis is working to make a little extra money as an orphan, and they're visited by this very powerful senator in the hierarchy. Prisoners are hooked up to these devices called sappers that take will from them continuously. The senator wants to talk to one of these prisoners. I thought it was a really deft stroke to begin the novel in a prison because, after all, how a society treats the people on the lowest rung of the ladder really shows you everything you need to know about its values. Here, exploitation is the name of the game. Thematically, The Will of the Many is interesting, if a little obvious at times. Do the people who are exploited by a system deserve to be punished for participating in that system, even if they don't have a choice? Or perhaps they have the illusion of a choice? The answer to these questions are fairly obvious to me, but the book poses them as though they're not, and I don't know, maybe they aren't, but I just know that I liked this book primarily for its plot and character work. The themes were more to add flavor than to be the main bulk of the story. It does astound me that this book is classified as adult fantasy because it is so deeply inspired by the YA 2010s dystopian novel craze in terms of tone and structure, but the ending of this book was crazy, and I will be seated for The Strength of the Few come this fall. The final book I wanted to talk about was a little bit of a disappointment, so I won't spend too much time on it. Blackfish City by Sam J. Miller is a bad climate fiction novel set in a fictional city that does not justify being a fictional city. Like, he could have just set it in New York and called it a day. Basically, the plot of the book is that this woman riding a killer whale arrives to the city and starts causing problems. Like, that's literally the plot. It's kind of incoherent in my opinion, and there's all these different character POVs. It just doesn't work as well. I read this book for a climate fiction book club, and I genuinely am reconsidering going to book clubs at this point because I've read so many bad books because of book clubs, and I keep reading them because I want to go to the club and meet people and make friends, but unfortunately I just keep reading bad books, and if I have to read another bad book, I might explode. Anyways, The Blackfish City is an utterly derivative book that borrows its neo-noir gritty aesthetic from the movie Blade Runner, but it doesn't do anything to put its own spin on that. If anything, Will of the Many shows us that you can take very well-known and beloved tropes and make it your own. It's totally fine to borrow from other books and movies and stuff, but you have to do something with it that's unique. This book really masquerades as a science fiction novel, and in my opinion, it's just a bad fantasy novel. One of the main plot lines in this book is about how people who can bond animals are an oppressed group. The explanation for why people can telepathically link to animals is hand-wavy at best and has no real grounding in scientific concepts. Even suspending my disbelief that far, I have to think of Robin Hobb, who handles this exact concept in the Realm of the Elderling series and handles it beautifully and with so much nuance and pathos. All of that is just completely lacking here. It's a very basic exploration of what that bond might look like. I think Miller was trying to go for some kind of metaphor for Indigenous peoples and their connections to nature and conservation and the importance of their practices when it comes to things like that, but I think it comes off more disrespectful here than anything because of its surface levelness. If you want to read some actually good climate fiction, I would recommend New York 2140 by Kim Stanley Robinson, or even The God Is Not Willing has a more refreshing and interesting take on climate fiction. That's all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to share in the comments down below what your month of reading was like in July. I would love to hear. And until the next video, take care.